Hey, welcome to the Road to Black podcast. I'm here with my man Wes and with our guest today. He's a good friend of ours. He's a big personality in the Arizona Jiu-Jitsu community. He's one of my instructors. I love this guy, Josh Rodriguez. Welcome
What's up, guys?
Josh.
How you doing? I'm doing good.
How you doing, man? Good.
Excited to talk to you guys.
I see you wearing the Suns jersey.
Oh yeah, Suns in 7.
Let's talk about the Suns just for just a second.
So Suns in 7, Suns in 2.
It'll happen.
So
It'll happen, man.
I grew up.
Hey, that's gonna make it all the more beautiful.
I grew up a Suns fan, and it's been a long time since they've been this good. If this might be the best team they ever had. So, for me, like sports is I don't know what's more important, like jiu-jitsu and sports. They're like always have been. It's a bit of battle for me to find time for one of them. Usually, like in my younger years, I missed all the games because I was teaching every single night or training every night. Now that I have kids, I have an excuse to be home more, and then I use that excuse to watch basketball.
Yeah.
But it's been fun, man. I'm excited.
There you go. How much are you teaching these days?
Right now, I'm teaching only 5 classes a week. I have two young kids at home, a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old. So it's kind of hard to get away from the house. And my wife also trains, and she probably likes jiu-jitsu more than me. So it's kind of a battle, Like one of us is going to be home with the kids, and one of us is going to train. And for sure, like she's the first one to out of bed, and she's already ready. Like, hey, if you're not going to train, I'll go train. That's how it goes. So
right, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, well, I try to train.
It's.
I want to get like 3 good sessions in a week on top of my teaching. Because I train every time I teach. So if I can get 3 sessions for me on top of that, I'm good. It's been kind of tough, but I think we're getting close to a place where I can train a little bit more. Maybe even bring the kids with me. They're getting a little older, so. I think I'm not far off.
Yeah.
I think somebody told me a couple years back, like they called it seasons of life, and right now the season I'm in is just not for me. It's more for my family. My wife is she loves training and she wants to be involved, and I love to see her have fun training. So she gets first dibs right now.
Yeah, that's great. It's hard to juggle. I mean, having small children, I can attest, man. As you guys had a baby and then a second baby, I was just, I talked to you. I'm like, man, when you have the second one,
there's no time.
It's just there's just no time, and jiu-jitsu takes up so much of your time. At least for you, this is your career as well. So you're coaching and you get to be, you have to be there. And that even if your mindset isn't on, I know your mindset's on jiu-jitsu all the time because you're studying, you're always coming up with techniques for teaching and coaching. You're very, very well respected in our gym in terms of an instructor. Everyone I've talked to loves taking your classes. So you act like you're not dialed in, but you are. So it's just that Vanessa is more crazy to get those hard rounds in.
She's the competitor that I was when I was 26 or 27. She's that person now, and I'm like, I want to compete when I can, but I know that it's always gonna be there, But I haven't lost any focus. Like when I'm watching the Suns game, I have 2 TVs always out. I bring my second TV out to watch the Who's Number One or whatever I can watch. I'm always gaining knowledge. Like I feel like I'm learning every day from some kind of video or podcast or something.
Yeah. What's it been like to meet your future wife in jiu-jitsu and then have somebody have a training partner? I know you guys have a funny kind of back and forth in terms of she's always like, Josh never wants to train with me, or he only wants to train at this time, or what is that experience? Because it's unique. It's not unique because we have, I think, 1, 2, at least 3 of our other guests, or 2 of them have people, their significant others train jiu-jitsu as well. But with Vanessa, she started as a lower belt. You've kind of seen her come along and seen her advance. I know you're super proud of her. She's a master world champion. Talk about that a little bit. And does it create? Is it because my lady or nobody in
Right.
my family trains. So is that a
Right,
good
so-
thing? I
No,
I shouldn't put you on the
100%.
spot
This is
like
an easy
that.
question. Me and her talk about this.
You're not
We
gonna
talk
say
about this.
no.
She knows how I feel. This is
Yeah.
I think it's a super good thing because of where I'm at. Like, mentally, it's not that I'm checked out. I spent from 20 to about 32 every year. Like, people would ask me, like, hey, Josh, are you going to do the Worlds? Like, I almost get offended when you ask me the question. Like, of course I'm doing the Worlds. Of course I'm
Yeah.
going to Europe. Of course I'm doing the Pan Ams. Like, forever, it was every tournament. My goal was always 12 tournaments a year, so one per month. And if I can sneak a few more in, I would. And I always did. I found ways to compete when, for the most part, I didn't have the money to do it. I would have a paycheck, and it's like, okay, I can pay my rent, or I can sign up for this tournament and buy these plane tickets. And then I'd be like, the rent, I'll figure rent out. So I buy the plane ticket. I sign up for the tournament, and I did that for so long, and I had a ton of fun. I don't feel like I didn't get enough of it. Not that I'm burnt out on it or anything. I just think that I've had a lot of fun competing, and I do love to teach, and I love to learn. I'm not really in a classroom setting much anymore, so it doesn't take away so much from me to let her kind of take the. She takes the lead now. When we think about tournaments, I'm thinking about her competing, and if I can, I will. With her schedule, she works weekends, so it's kind of tough for her to pick out a bunch of tournaments. So we kind of focus on, the big ones like the Pans, the Worlds, stuff like that. Yeah. But in home life, depends on kind of where we are. Like when things are tough for us with the kids, like when we brought the baby home the first few weeks of both babies, it's tough because no one's sleeping. We're fighting over whose turn it is to get up in the morning first, and so now she wants to train and I don't want to train, or I want to go to the gym and she wants to go to the gym, and we might have some kind of, tiny little arguments about that. But for the most part, I think we found like a comfort zone where we kind of feed off of each other. So like there's a new Daisy Fresh episode on, like all the stuff on Flow. She's into that stuff, and for me, I don't watch the Kardashians and I don't watch the Real World and stuff. So we can watch that stuff together, and we can have conversation over stuff that I've been watching and been doing my whole life, or not my whole life, but the last 15 years. So it's kind of like we get to blend our two worlds together with jiu-jitsu, So it can be hard when it comes to training time and like dating time. I'm not even mention that. Like there's no time for dates or anything like that. But our dates are we get a babysitter twice a week so that we can train together Tuesday and Thursday, and that's our date. Like for us, that's good quality time together.
Yeah, that's great. You guys figured it out. I mean, I guess it's like any relationship, whether one person trains jiu-jitsu, the other one just is a runner. I mean, and you have two kids, you got to like find the time for both of you. Both of you have to find the time to get that.
I think the kids actually help too to get us. I don't think we necessarily need a lot of time apart, but with the kids, we can't really go train together. One of us has to stay home. So, like for me, when I have to go teach and train, sometimes it's like this is my break, and I tell her the same thing when she goes to work over the weekend. She works overnights. I tell her this is your break from us, like me and the kids. You get away from the chaos of a household, right?
Yep. It can be chaotic. I've seen your videos with your kids.
They're wild, man. We were in the pool this morning at like 7 a.m. So.
He's a little swimmer. What for the listeners, tell us a little bit. We always ask our guests, where did you start? When and where did you start jiu-jitsu, and what made you totally fall for it?
So I still remember the phone call that I made to Chris Lopez's gym. Chris Lopez is a black belt under Gustavo Dantes. That's where I started back in 2007. I was 20 years old, and I called, and I remember saying, am I too old to start jiu-jitsu? I was only 20. And I was like, am I too old to start? Because, you see all these guys in the MMA and jiu-jitsu community, and they're like 24, and they're already like super established. And I was like, how am I going to do that in 4 years? So, because my mindset from the beginning was never to go get in shape or find a hobby. I thought that I wanted to compete. Actually, I wanted to fight MMA for the first like 3 or 4 years. That's what my goal was. So I started with Chris Lopez, and his rule was you had to have a blue belt before you could fight an MMA fight. So I was like, all right, cool, let's learn jiu-jitsu, and I thought I was doing pretty good in the beginning. I was winning a lot of tournaments, but I wasn't getting promoted. It was like 3.5, almost 4 years I was a white belt, and I was doing well, but I had like, it was just enough time for me to fall in love with jiu-jitsu. You know, so like I think he kind of tricked me into making me.
Right.
He's like, no, you got to wait till you're a blue belt, and then he just wouldn't promote me until I was like, he knew I was in love with jiu-jitsu. So now it's okay. But what happened was I got my blue belt, and I was training a lot of Muay Thai, and we were just doing like a really light sparring session at a different gym, and I just kind of like we would like fake a single leg, and my partner just threw a knee, not a hard one or anything, but it hit me right over my eyebrow. I had like 18 stitches, and for the next year, every time I would try to spar, it would rip open again. So I just could not train, you know, forever. So I was focused on jiu-jitsu, and I could teach. I wasn't teaching yet, but I was involved in the classes a lot. You know, I wouldn't say I was teaching, but by the time I was 3-4 years in, I was like learning a lot, and I was having discussions with black belts and with other instructors. So I wasn't teaching, but I was involved with a lot of the classes and stuff, so I just felt like this could be an easier path. You know, I thought maybe I could just do jiu-jitsu, and it seems like there's some money to be made nowadays. And I mean, back then, the only way you could make money was opening a gym, but that's what I wanted to do anyways, you know, so that's kind of what the focus was.
Yeah.
And so I was with Lopez at that point, and I started competing pretty heavily then, and that was when, I think 2009 was my first year at the Pans. And from 2009 to 2019, I think I went to every Pans and every Worlds, you know. So I remember my first time at the Pans, I wore a black gi. My first instructor, he used to say you couldn't wear a black gi until you were a blue belt. And he doesn't ever coach at tournaments, so he showed up at the tournament and he saw me in my black gi, and I was trying to like hide from him. And I remember he was like, "Oh, you got a black gi?" I was like, yeah, I thought I was getting a blue belt soon, and you never gave it to me, so I'm going to wear the gi. But, so I started there, you know. Go ahead. I was just going to say I started there, and I was there for most of till about purple belt, and then I ended up going over to Gustavo's.
Did you always kind of see yourself transitioning into a coaching role?
Yeah, I think by the time I was like maybe 2 or 3 stripes at blue belt, I knew I was going to coach. I'm the kind of person that can't help sharing my feelings about something, you know, like
Yeah.
Even back then, I'm sure I was wrong about a lot of stuff, you know, but like I remember I went to a Mendez Brothers seminar, and it was 3 hours on a leg drag. Looking back, it was kind of a boring seminar back then, but to me, like, it was so hard to do the move. The leg drag in 2009 was, maybe 2010, was still kind of a new, highly technical move, you know. So I remember my coach asked me to show it to the class, and it took me like 30 minutes, and I could not get the technique across. Like, I was just like, man, nobody's understanding, you know, and it's such an easy technique that you should be able to teach it. So I think that was when I was like, all right, I'm going to start paying more attention, and YouTube was starting to get a little bit bigger back then, so I was on YouTube every day, and I was watching, you know, remember the Arts Suave videos? The Arts Suave Volume 1 and 2. There might have been a 3. Man, I was watching those every day, and I was trying to catch little clips of something cool I can show from Jacare or, you know, Ari Farias or something like that back then. So I kind of knew I wanted to teach. I just didn't know if it was possible yet. I don't think that I believed that I could do it yet.
Yeah. Especially because there was, you know, it's just exploded in the last 10 years since then. I mean, and back then it was like, you were probably like, especially because you're a lower belt, you're probably just like, hey, there's these black belts. Those are the ones that are qualified
funny is
to
there
teach,
was only
you know, there's like an aura.
There wasn't a lot of them.
There's only not many of them. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to be involved like that, and since the day I met you, when you're a purple belt, probably when you're at GD, I mean, I could just tell your personality is always like that.
Yeah.
So even like in a non-official coaching setting, you're always sharing ideas and going back and forth.
I think I wanted to coach other sports growing up, you know, and I just never thought that I was qualified to do it. So, like with jiu-jitsu, I was like, I'm not going to waste this chance. I'm going to get qualified, and I wanted to teach, so I kind of saw it from the beginning.
Yeah. When you got your black belt, you actually I was lucky enough to I was awarded my purple belt on the day you got your black belt. So and it was a awesome day for me to be able to see you do that. So what was the anticipation for that? Because I know at that point you'd probably been training for 10 years or more.
Yeah, because we're at
10 years.
I was a black belt. I'm a black belt now 4 years, so I've been almost 11 years at that point.
2017.
Yeah, it was almost 11 years at that point.
Okay.
Man, I kind of
What did it do for you?
For me, it was like a bunch of different emotions. Like on one stage, it was like, okay, I got to where I wanted to get to, but I didn't have what I wanted that came with it. Like, I took third place at the Europeans as a brown belt. I took third place at the Pans one year. I won the New York Open as a brown belt. I won, some events here and there, but I always thought I was going to win a world title somehow, or a Pan Am somehow, and I lost in the Worlds in the quarterfinals like 6 or 7 times, so I just pictured myself by the time I was a black belt, like going into the black belt, like fresh as like a huge name, or I thought pretty highly of who I was, not necessarily because of myself, but because of who I was training with, like Espen Mathiasen and Tommy and Orlando Montero, my roommate forever, like I trained with some really high level guys, Marcio Andre, and just tons of guys for years and years and years, and I just thought that, okay, eventually I'm gonna get over that hump and win one of those big tournaments. So when I got my black belt, it was like, all right, I didn't get what I wanted. I got pretty close. I fought a lot of really good guys. I beat a lot of good guys. I lost to a lot of good guys. So I knew I had the experience to be there, but it was like I wasn't sure what level I was at, because they always talk about when you get to black belt, the level is different. It's like going from college to the pros in different sports, right? So I wasn't sure exactly where I was. I knew I was close to kind of where I wanted to be, but it was I knew it was coming because after my second year as a brown belt, I lost in the 5th round at the Worlds. And Gustavo the next day or the next week, he was like, "Hey, so do you ready for your black belt?" And I was like, "Whoa, you can't ask me that. That's not my decision." And he was like, "All right, we'll wait till next year." And then he just walked out of the room. And and I remember Orlando got his black belt that year, and me and him were roommates for years. So I thought we were going to get our black belt together. So I had one more year at brown belt, and then I ended up getting injured the week before Worlds. I hurt my ribs. So like when I fought my last year at brown belts at the Worlds, I lost like a crazy match. It was like 14-16. I just could not. I had no strength on top. So every time I would sweep this guy and he would push against me, my ribs were like giving out, and I would have to fall over and give up a sweep, and then I would sweep him back, and then he'd sweep me back, and it's kind of a weird way to end. Feeling pretty successful at the brown belt level, and then losing in the first round of the Worlds my final year. So going into black belt, I think I was just ready to find out. I wasn't sure. I was ready to let's see. Let's see what it's going to be like.
Yeah. You have such high expectations for yourself. Because I'm sitting here listening to you going, man, you're qualified. Yeah, you're overqualified to be the black belt, but in your mind, you're like, I should have.
But I pictured myself like
that you're in the smaller percentage of people that train, a very small percentage that can actually talk in that realm of my anticipation was being a world champion.
And I know I never got there, but I was right below the level that I wanted to get to. I had some really tough matches with some really good guys, and I think that if I went back, the one thing that I would change a lot of things, but as a competitor, the one thing I would change, and I don't know if this is advice for younger competitors or not, but I never really focused on one technique for a long, long time. I was never a specialized grappler. Like, I feel like some guys who are good at straight ankle locks, they pull guard, get to their single leg X, set up the straight ankle lock, and boom, they win 3 of their 4 matches like that. And me, I was like, I did lapel guard for my whole brown belt career, but I played a different guard every year, every other year, because I just wanted to learn everything, And I thought it was going to pay off earlier, and what actually happened was it helped me as an instructor, because now, for example, I never play spider guard ever. It's not my game. I don't really play it much. I just don't find myself in positions to use it, but I love to teach it. I love teaching spider guard. I love teaching takedowns or passes or stuff that I don't do a ton, because I feel that I'm getting better as I teach them, and I have to focus more. Like, if I'm showing the same sweep that I've always done well, I can just run through it. I run through it, and I might actually get worse over time because I'm just showing it the same way all the time. Whereas if I'm teaching like spider guard, I'm super focused to give the students a good class because they're paying for a good class, and I have to do my best. So I feel like I'm more invested when I'm teaching techniques that I don't necessarily do myself. So if I could go back, I would have been more of a specialized grappler. I would have been let me pull guard and get to my specialty and then win matches like that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. And I think you took the words right out of my mouth, man. It translated well to you being an even better instructor. And really, that's, to be honest, whether you know this or not, you're known to be like so well-rounded in all different aspects of the game. Like, that's how we look at you as students. Mm-hmm. So I think about that a lot in terms of competition, because I have friends that are successful competitors and they're very focused on their game. Even students that like take some of my classes, and I'm careful to not coach them away from what their power, if they're a competitor. Like, if you're not a competitor, I think you need to open up and learn. And whether you're a competitor or not, you need to learn all aspects. Right. You need to be well-rounded. That's my philosophy. But if you're competing, there is something to be said about being comfortable in your positions in terms of success in competition. I mean, that straight away, we all three can name several people we even know that just focus on one or two very strict techniques. And I don't know. I mean, I think that's good for competition, but if you're, and I don't have anybody in mind, but if that's all you're doing on the practice mats, on competition, all throughout your purple, brown belt, black belt,
I think
maybe
a really
you're not
good
as
example,
well-rounded. And so maybe it doesn't suit
I think
you
a good
better.
example of somebody that you guys know well, and is Rolando Montero, one of my old roommate, one of my best friends. Mm-hmm. When he was a blue belt, he footlocked everybody. Like, he would have 6 wins at the Pans, and 4 of them would be a straight ankle lock. And I remember like telling him, like, man, it's sometimes like you don't even have to fight some of those guys because you submit them so quick. I wish I could do that, but as he got to the higher levels and he saw things starting to change, he had to adapt. And now, like, if you ever watch him in the gym, he's usually wrestling or he's usually doing stuff that is not what he does. It's not what he's best at, because he sees that you have to evolve and you have to do everything. So, like, he's a great example of somebody who was a specialized grappler as a lower belt, and now, like, I think just like me, he can teach anything. Like, he learns berimbolo stuff. He learns stuff that he doesn't do all the time, and that's kind of how I think you have to. Your mindset has to be. You have to be willing to be bad at something for a while. Like wrestling. It took me like 7 years to even learn a takedown or to be confident in one takedown, because when you're bad at it, it's not fun, and then you don't want to learn it. It's like, man, I'm just gonna pull guard. For like 7 years, that was me. Like, every year, I'm just gonna pull guard until I had to teach takedowns. And I had to learn, like, okay, they're not going to stop asking me to show them a takedown. I'm going to have to learn a couple, right? And then once you learn one, you get better, and then you can start building your confidence. So I wish as a competitor I had a little bit of both. I wish I was maybe a little more specialized. But I don't regret anything, because if I won the brown belt world title, or the blue belt or purple belt, I don't think anybody would even know anymore. Like, time goes by, and if I go and I win a big tournament tomorrow, they're going to think about that. They're not going to think about me 4 or 5 years ago. So,
as a coach, how do you bring students along and and kind of balance that, because the tendency is, I think all of us at one point or another go through that, like where we kind of get stuck doing the things that we're really good at, like you guys were both just saying. But then, and there's nothing wrong with developing that and spending time on something for an extended period of time. But then how do you kind of balance that as a coach when you look at a student and you're saying, yeah, he's really hitting X technique really well, but you look at maybe his body type or the way that he's training, and you try to push him into another system or a game and give him that kind of advice to bring him up and make him a better
a lot
graphic.
of it, yeah, 100%.
Does that make sense?
I have some examples I'm thinking in my mind, but a lot of it has to do with their mental, like the way they carry themselves in the gym. Because you guys know how jiu-jitsu is. Sometimes it can be rough when you're new, and you're learning. So like, let's say I have some smaller guys or girls that aren't very aggressive, and they I know they want to learn the technique, but they're just not going to force it to work. With people like that, I tell them it's going to take time, but if you learn the technique every day and you don't try to just win the rounds, you try to win the technique, then you're gonna be better in the long run. Like, let's say I have person A, and I'm not trying to call anybody out, but let's say it's a guy who's not very aggressive. He gets intimidated easily, or he gets smashed easily. He's a smaller guy, right? With him, I'm going to tell him, you need to learn the technique all the time, every day. And then your rounds, you're not looking for a victory in the round. You're looking for little victories. Like, did you get the underhook? Did you break that grip? Little victories, right? And then over time, as you get better, you can start to pick up your intensity a little bit, because now you believe in yourself a little more because your techniques work. If your techniques aren't working, you won't have any belief in yourself, right? Then you have the other guy. Let's say the guy that came in maybe has a little wrestling or football or just an aggressive guy. And like, I have some wrestlers that come in and I tell them, look, if you can get from your butt to a single leg, that's all you need for the first couple years. Boom, get up from your half guard, get a single leg sweep, learn how to get the underhook on top, learn how to avoid certain positions. And those guys, I want them to compete and win. So like, there's some guys in Nogi, we focus on the same thing almost every day. Like, of course, when I teach the technique of the class, I want them to learn. But when it comes to them, sometimes it's like, dude, can you get off your butt and get a single leg? That's all you need to learn for a while for some guys. So it just depends on the person, and like Vanessa is a great example. She's kind of in the middle where she wants to be aggressive. But when you're a girl and you're smaller, you have to learn the technique first. You can't just start trying to smash people and be aggressive and push people around, because if you don't know the technique, none of that's going to work anyway. So it's just kind of, for me, it's all about the personality of the person and where they're coming from and where they want to go to,
Mm-hmm. That's great insight. I mean,
yeah,
because you're doing a lot of coaching and we've talked about this before on the podcast, is like, it's hard as an academy owner. Let's say we're blessed at our academy at GD Jiu-Jitsu. There's several coaches there, so you have the opportunity to really see. There's a lot of eyes on the students, but as you know, you've been around guys like Lopez when you first started out. Here's a guy like, he's got his own academy. He's responsible for everyone's progression, and it's so hard. I know you take that to heart, and what I'm saying is you do a lot of one-on-one analysis of different people. You just talked right through a couple scenarios. That's very important for coaches, and not all of them are built the same. We're lucky we're in a good group of people and instructors, but there's other places that people are just training under one person, and that person doesn't really care that you're smaller, or doesn't have that insight that you have that says, hey, you need to work on this, this, and this. They might be teaching that smaller person the same exact thing as the 240-pounder. And those people aren't going to progress in the same way, learning the same exact things every day.
One of the things that I always think about, I think where jiu-jitsu needs to be, especially, like, I take myself back to GD 3 years ago, when we had 15 to 20, like, potential world medalists on the mats at one time. Sometimes the class needs to be specialized to everybody. And I got a good example when I was a brown belt, I was teaching a lot of classes with guys who were way better than me. You know, like I had Espen and Tommy and Orlando were all living with me, you know, and a bunch of other random Brazilians and random guys that were coming from different countries all the time. And I would ask them, like, hey, how do you feel about the class? And what ended up happening was I started teaching, like, let's say we would we would do our warm-up, we would do some kind of takedown or pass or sequence or something to get warmed up, and then I'd be like, all right, guys, we're going to pull guard. I want you to get to your favorite guard, and I want you to work your favorite entry. Pull guard, get into your position, and then shoot an attack, whether it's a submission or a sweep or something. Because if I'm teaching half guard guy and I'm teaching spider guard guy, and the worlds are coming up in 3 weeks, and I'm making half guard guy play spider guard, that's not his game, you know? So this kind of, not that I'm wasting his time, but he needs to be focused on what he needs to be focused on to be ready for the tournament. So I remember, like, a big moment for me was I was talking with, actually the same conversation happened with Orlando and Espen, and they told me that they felt that my classes were really good because I didn't force them to do one thing. Like Orlando would always talk about in Brazil, you know, you show up, they teach the technique, you have to do the same technique everybody else is doing, and then you roll the whole time, right? And I would try to make the class work for everybody to where we can do a specific where everybody's starting in a new position. Like, okay, you're gonna go to your favorite guard. Person on top is gonna start with the grip they want, and person on bottom has one advantage. We're in a 3-minute round. You know, we're playing a tournament style specific. So now everybody could, like, one guy might be in spider guard, one might be in De La Riva. So we're all working our own game, but I'm not forcing them to do just what I think is best for them. You know, they could play their own game. I think that's super important, and I like to train like that. It's not for everybody yet, because as a beginner, you kind of need guidance. But I think once you're like purple belt or maybe even high level blue belt, there are times when the coach kind of needs to not necessarily get out of the way, but look at it as like a football coach. You see a lot of older football coaches. They're not out there running routes with the players. You know, they're not out there doing the moves. Sometimes the students need to do their own kind of my drills, but their own little mix to it. You know, half guard or whatever. So I prefer that kind of training, and I think it's good for them.
But especially leading up to a tournament, that's key, right? I mean, you can stop teaching, like, forcing stuff down those, especially that group you were working with. You know, they didn't really need you to force any new moves down their throat. They needed time to work on their own advancements and play their own game. So, and I've been in the gym when you've done that for our class. You know, so I mean, very specific things where I can tell you're looking to elevate that person no matter what level they're at. Right. You know, so we have like our listeners, obviously the podcast, The Road to Black. So a lot of our focus is, you know, the journey to black belt, right? And beyond, but that's the journey. You know, when you're starting, you're looking to get to your black belt, right? So you're talking, like, you've been fortunate. You're a jiu-jitsu nerd,
100%.
You know, and I say that with
I use that word a lot
in a good way. You're just, I mean, that's what we are. Like, look at us. We're talking on a jiu-jitsu podcast. So, but you've always, since you're 20 years old, you've been dialed into this. You have these very high expectations for yourself. You've trained with world champs, guys that are at the highest level in the sport. Let's take it back a step. And what do you suggest in terms of, not even suggest, but let's say somebody that's never going to compete. We all know these people. They're in our classes. That's fine. People, whether you're not going to compete or you have no desire to get into that higher competitive training environment, what do you look for in terms of advancement? This is something we always ask the coaches here. Maybe not so much, hey, this is what a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt is, but what makes a black belt? I mean, this is so subjective. It's just subjective within every gym. All belt promotions are. But going back to what Gustavo said, he knew you were a competitor. And when he asked you that, it meant, are you ready to get out there as a brown belt one more time and give this a go, right? I mean, that's basically what he made you do. that's not going to be the case. He's not going to say that for everyone, you know. So we have a mix of listeners. Some have competitive aspirations, some not. What should the regular, maybe 30, 40-year-old person, not even to put an age on it, but somebody that maybe is not have those same goals as you, but they do want to advance, what should they be doing? Maybe not belt specific, but how do you, I know you have a lot of thought and insight on how to progress as a jiu-jitsu athlete. So what in general can people do to keep advancing and keep building that knowledge?
You know, you can go a million ways with this answer, and I'm pretty sure that I'm kind of dialed into one way of thinking now, and it's all about a positive environment. If you're not enjoying your training, if you don't like your training partners, if you don't like your coaches, if you don't want to go to the gym, it's hard. Like, for me, the times that I felt that I wasn't progressing or when I was doing like crazy weight cuts, you know, when I was cutting 15 pounds, and I felt like I was getting tougher, but I wasn't getting better because I'm going to the gym because I don't want to get my ass kicked at the tournament, not because I'm excited to go, you know. It's just like I got to get better. Now, especially like after my last crazy 3 years with my knee and the kids and everything, like I really feel that I'm in probably the biggest improvement phase of my career because I'm enjoying almost every class. It's rare that I'm not enjoying a class, amazing. You know, and if I could go back to some lower belt days, like I even heard a Tom DeBlass quote or something. They said, if you could look back, what do you regret? He was like, I regret being that partner that people didn't want to train with, being like, just you feel like you're supposed to try to smash, like you're supposed to be super tough, you know, like no one should get mad at me if I put my shoulder in their face too hard. Like people should be proud of me that I'm training that hard all the time and I want to grind and hurt myself or somebody else maybe, you know. Now looking back, I just feel that I've done so much better when I'm enjoying my time and I'm focused on the moment, you know. Like I'm not looking forward to the tournament. I'm in the class, and you know, you hear this a lot from the older group at the gym. We train to get back tomorrow, not to get to the next tournament. I just want to be able to come back to the gym and train, you know, the next day. So I feel that improvement, in my opinion, comes the most when you're, and this could be different from a lot of people, but for me is when you're enjoying your time or you're having a good time. And for some people like my wife, for example, when she's locked in studying for whatever test she's doing for school or something, she might not be enjoying it the same way I am enjoying, but she's locked in and she's learning like that. So everybody's a little different. For me, it's all about having fun, and I tell people all the time, I go to the gym to see my friends sometimes, you know. That's what I miss about open mats. Yeah. I miss hanging out with my friends. Like, I don't even need to train. I just want to go sit on the wall and watch you guys train and talk and everything. So that's when I feel the biggest improvement.
Yeah, you know, you may or may not remember this, and I don't know when this shift kind of happened. I've told a few people about this, and I may have even told this story on the podcast just peripherally, but I was training. I was a purple belt, and I was training a lot, and I didn't feel like I was getting better, and I was like stuck. It was like a hard plateau. Training wasn't fun. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to get better, and I think I sat on the side. I can like remember even which wall it was, and me and you were just sitting there bullshitting, and I kind of unloaded on you a little bit about like, man, I'm in a really bad spot with my jiu-jitsu. Like, it's not fun. I'm not getting better. And you gave me almost exactly that same advice. And you might have been a brown belt at the time. I can't remember exactly, but you gave me almost that exact same advice. And it was like, this needs to be fun. What you're doing right now is you're putting pressure on yourself to get better and get better faster. And you're adding all these additional complications to your training, and really when you show up here, it just needs to be fun. And it was a huge weight off my shoulders because it was an outside perspective my coach was watching me train and watching me go through this, and I kind of just had enough. I kind of unloaded, and you gave me that exact same advice, and
Well,
so
if you
I
think
guess,
about it,
thank you for that, because that's advice that I have given to people, even as
well,
much
it's so
as recently.
easy.
We've had
And
full
it's
we have
super
had full
important.
episodes.
It's so
on that.
easy to look at your peers and be like, man, Espen just won the gold. Orlando just won the gold. Marcio's #1 ranked in the world. I can go down the list of guys, that I'm around, and they're all doing, Tommy and Luan and guys that I've lived with. I've lived with multiple world champions, and you see these medals on their wall, and you see these trips they're going on, and they got sponsors that give them this and that, and you're like, man, why am I not progressing? I'm not doing good. So it's easy to put that pressure on yourself and feel like I need to be better. And it's just, all that stuff doesn't matter as much as you think it does. In the moment, it feels like it. But at the end of the day, like, I don't feel like I've lost any respect from my peers because I won the state tournament, but I didn't win the national tournament. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, not at all. That's not how it works. I mean, it's all the pressure you put on yourself. And it's everybody from the white belt that's putting too much pressure on their tournament to myself has put too much pressure to you, to high-level guys, black belts. I mean, it's like, it's so true. Like that, what they say is like, it's all about the journey, And that's what that kind of quote means is like, we've had at least one or two podcasts where we focused entirely on this, where we just say not to tell anybody to leave their gym, but if you are not in a good situation, the same thing. You got to find a good, and that can be very difficult in certain parts of the world and parts of the country where there's just there isn't a group setting like we've been fortunate to have, and especially in Arizona, there's many gyms now that have that really good vibe in terms of the community as a whole, but also just within the gym,
It's not even about
you got to find a good place to where you want to hang out, and these are people are going to become your closest friends. You're spending 3, 4, sometimes more days. I mean, I see the guys in the gym more than I see anybody else.
I tell people that all the time.
Honestly, I mean, that's
before Vanessa. I was in the gym more than I saw my family, like my parents and my brothers and sister. I saw my training partners probably 10 times more than I saw I see my mom a couple times a year because she lives out of state, and I was at the gym 3 times a day every day for 7 or 8 years, So it's easy to feel like you're so immersed in jiu-jitsu that it's kind of hard. You're putting so much pressure on yourself because you're there all the time. You're there all the time. So it should be fun.
Yeah. And everybody's growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
You're in an environment of growth. So if sometimes this is also common, we always measure ourselves. You've talked about it you've just been talking about this whole time about you measuring yourself against those other guys. But what do they always say? You should only be measuring yourself against yourself, right? I mean, as long as you're progressing, this is the long game. And we talk about that here a lot on this podcast just because, I'm an older grappler, so I very well recognize that you have to, it doesn't make any sense to waste your time in a place where you're just dreading to go. I mean, it's like anything. It's like if you're in a job, you're much less likely to advance if you hate your job.
100%.
It's just
100%.
It's just the facts. I mean, if you're in a position, you're at work where you enjoy it, you want to grow and progress, and whether it's moving up the corporate ladder or taking over a business for someone or whatever it is, but it's got to be fun, man. And I've always been, I've always had that at GD. Like people always ask, like, for me in particular, I'm just unique because I've always trained in one specific time frame. So there's people have come and gone out of that time frame, but the core feeling and group has always been there. Where you might have a night class at GD that looks completely different now versus 2 years ago or something. So it can shift, right? It can shift within your training career within a gym. So that's difficult, but I think
you're lucky.
We're all responsible to
Yeah.
create that vibe, though. We're all responsible to.
And I tell one thing I tell my students all the time,
To-
especially the girls, that sometimes you have to create your training partners. Like I tell my wife all the time, there's not a lot of girls that are training, especially her size. So when there's somebody there, even if they're brand new and they can't help you now, you need to put time in to make them your training partner. Like for me, every time I see somebody come in that's like around 150, 160, I'm like, boom, I'm going to do everything I can to make that guy really good so that I can beat him up in the future, right?
Yeah.
That's what I want. I want to
Yeah.
have a training
Yeah.
partner that can give me a good round. So you should be helping everybody, and that's how you build those relationships. That's how you start to make those friends,
Exactly.
and people start to trust in you to help them. And that's probably one of the most fulfilling parts of jiu-jitsu is when you not only you're making friends, but people are getting something from you. You're able to provide something, and it doesn't mean you're an instructor. You could be a white belt who wrestled your whole life, and you come in and you're teaching a brown belt a takedown. It's just, it feels good to be able to give back to the gym, and then that's how that whole cycle starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole every aspect of life, the whole thing with group learning, group advancement. We talked about this before on the podcast. Whether you're in business and you're working as a team, if everyone's contributing, that's what's building that community. And I'm lucky that there's a few people in the morning class when I train, and including my instructors, and that's one of you being one of them for years now. You keep those people, and we keep adding people. Now there's a bigger group of morning people, and they're very consistent, and they like really training with those same people, and they are very close, as those guys in the morning, they're very close knit. I don't see anything breaking them up completely right now. And you're just going to keep building that. And that happens in gyms all over the place. Or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Wes has talked about this on the podcast where he's experienced places that don't have that at all. It's the opposite. People don't want to go back. They don't find that at all in those groups. So, but that goes back to the owner of the academy, the instructors, and how they welcome and take people in and build that community.
That's why
each
your
class.
regular average guy, let's say your average brown belt who has a job and a family, or maybe a new black belt, and they don't think they could open a gym. To be honest, it's not always about your level of technique. It's about how much do the students think you care about them. Because I didn't know anything, right? I didn't know anything about
100%.
leg locks a couple years ago, but I can learn them. I've been learning them. So if I had my own academy and I was missing something, you could always add. I could always get better at the technique, but you can't become a better person, or you can become a better person. But if you're a better person from the beginning, that's how you're going to get students. There are some of my good friends in this sport who started their academies at an older age, like my friend Paul Nava, or lately Alex Martinez. They opened a gym at an older age, and it doesn't even matter. They have huge followings, huge classes, and they're both world champions in the Masters division, but you're not going to open Gracie Mag and see them. It doesn't matter because they're friends with their students. Their students trust them, and they don't feel like some instructors, you just feel like, oh, they just want me to pay, and I'll pay, and I don't need to be their friend anyways. But I think a big part of it is being friends with your students and your students liking you.
Yep, and I think that's an old school mentality too. And I consider you a little bit, you're older school than me. You've been doing it a lot more years than me. But what I'm saying is, 10 years ago or more, you thought, I have to be a world champion to open a gym. And
I
you
felt like
probably
a
even
failure.
thought that. You're like, I'm not. I have to have. Yeah, I have to have these. But that is absolutely not what's happening nowadays. It's not. And Alex is a perfect example. He opened a gym during COVID, and he's killing it. And you know why? Because he's very, very much focused on people's growth and
he's a good person.
Of students. He's a good person. By the way, not one of those new people care or know if he's ever won a people don't look for that in a gym.
Right.
They don't do that anymore. No one's looking on Google going, yeah, you do want to see who this person is, but someone that's new, they don't really know even the difference between a world champion and a master world champion. Do you know? I mean, it doesn't as long as you're in the game, you have a good reputation, people are going to be, and it doesn't, this is the same thing with personal training people that get into personal training and athletic training. The ones that are successful are the ones that take a very personal approach, and the ones that aren't are, you can have all the accolades and you're still not a good coach or not a good leader. We've talked about that on the podcast before. So I just think that, and someday, if you do have the time, when your kids are a little bit older, when you do open your own school, I think you, and especially, people are just going to flock to your school because you have that personality and the wherewithal of doing that. You just have a great training outlook. So, I mean, that to me is just by the wayside, especially with the number of gyms that are opening. I mean, there's gyms that are being opened by people maybe they shouldn't
and
be.
And you could look at that.
Right?
That could be an intimidating thing, Like for me, I know I'm going to open a gym, and I probably should have a couple years ago. You guys know I had a bunch of different setbacks from different reasons, and it didn't happen yet. But even now, I'm not in a rush. I have a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old, and my wife trains. So I'm like, how am I going to teach 3 classes a day? When I have a gym, I don't want to have 5 instructors. I want to teach almost all the classes if I can, So I just don't feel worried like I used to feel, because I know what it's about now. I feel like if I show my students that I care and I put in the effort, then I think almost anybody could open a gym. I even talk with Wes about him being where he's at. He doesn't have a lot of options, and it's not always about did you win this or win that, because we could always get better. Technique's always going to be there, and we could always learn. So
yeah, exactly.
It's just about being a good person and really wanting it, right? Like anything else.
Yeah, and wanting to run a business, that's going to be the toughest part. I've talked to you personally about this. You're an amazing coach, but when you're opening a business, you have to think about the other side of that, and that's what these guys do. That is so amazing. Alex, in particular, has a nice team around him. There's a few people running that gym, so they can that benefits him. Because he can spend more time on the mats, where this person over here is going to make onboarding more people. That's why GD has grown so much that he has a team. Where back in the day it was just Gustavo doing everything. So we mentioned briefly, and I don't want to forget to talk about this, but not to end on a downer. We won't end on a downer, but tell us about your difficult year in terms of the repetitive surgeries that you went through, and we all witnessed it from afar.
Yeah,
I witnessed it as a friend of yours, but kind of walk us through quickly on what happened to you and the almost incredible shit that you had to go through to get back on the mats.
It's almost it's not even a downer to me anymore. Like, my wife will bring it up, and she's like, you don't realize how bad things were. And I'm like, I do. I'm so happy that I'm training again, that I don't feel so bad. Like, a lot of people ask me, you want to talk about it? Yeah, I'll talk about it. I'm not afraid to talk about it anyway. So, 2019, I was getting ready for the Nogi Worlds, and I was just on my feet. We were wrestling, and I kind of just took a weird step, and my knee kind of buckled a little bit, and I knew something happened. I've had a million knee injuries. At that point, I had already had surgery on both my knees to have my meniscus removed, probably like in 2012 or 13 or something like that, 14, somewhere around there. So when I hurt my knee, I was like, all right, another knee injury. It just sucked that it happened really close to a tournament. So we're like 10 days out, and I had to teach the next class. And as I'm teaching the next class, my knee popped again, and I had to stop teaching. And the next day, my knee was just swollen, and I was like, all right, here we go again, another knee injury. I had to pull out of the tournament. I couldn't do the tournament. And then I waited about 3 months, and my knee got a little bit less, like the swelling went away, and I was able to kind of walk again. And then I took on the fight against Keishinio at Fight to Win. And I trick myself all the time to think that I'm fine, even with injuries, because I've had so many injuries that you just like, whatever, I'll be all right when the adrenaline kicks in, And it's just hard to get ready for a big event. And then I had a kind of a tough match. I got caught in omoplata, and he's really good with that position. So I got caught with that. So now I had a tough match. It was for a title, by the way. It was on pay-per-view in front of everybody. I was 6-0 on the card, and I just lost. So it was kind of like man, I was 32 or 33 at the time. So I was like, what am I going to do? I'm getting older. I got to win these big matches, right? And then COVID happens. And so, like, I'm not training well. My knee's messed up. I'm going to go get this MRI and see. Because for years, I didn't want to get the MRI because I just didn't want to find out what was wrong. So I get the MRI, and the guy's like, yeah, your ACL is shredded. You know, he's like, it's totally torn. And I was like, all right, let's just do it. Because I knew that I had to do something. So there wasn't much conversation. It was like a 10-minute doctor's appointment. He was like, you need to do the surgery. I was like, fine, let's do it, whatever. So we schedule a surgery. I go in, I get the ACL done, and everyone's telling me how bad it's going to be, the pain after an ACL surgery. So I expect it to be pretty bad. And I remember I got home, and I was, after like 2 or 3 days, I was like, this is bad, but this is all right. I can handle this pain, you know. It's just like any other knee injury. And then like maybe day 10, all of a sudden the pain just changes. And I remember my wife works overnights, and I called her at 3 a.m. I was like, something's wrong. I don't know what's going on, but my knee is just killing me. Like, to where that was the day that I started not sleeping. My knee was just in so much pain I couldn't sleep. The next day, I go to the surgeon where I had my ACL. The guy had my ACL done, and his assistant's there, and his assistant is telling me, he's like, no, everything's fine. You know, you're just in pain because you just had ACL done. I was like, yeah, but I was fine for 9 days. All of a sudden, it was really bad. And he tried to send me home, and I remember I'm texting my wife, and I'm like, he's telling me I'm okay. And he's like, you need to tell him. And I was like, look, dude, something's wrong. I don't care what you're saying. Something's wrong, and you guys need to do some kind of test. So they took a syringe full of fluid out of my knee, and then they sent me home for a couple days or whatever, and they were going to call me in a couple days and tell me what the results were. Well, the next day my knee swells up again. So I go to urgent care because my friend works there, and I just said, I just want you to drain my knee because it's so full of fluid. And when he drained it, he was like, the color of this is not right. So he actually had me call the surgeon, and after a couple phone calls, they were like, you need to come back in. There's a staph infection. So I go back in, and they're going to do a surgery called a debridement, where they go into your knee and they're trying to like kill all the bacteria or whatever. You know, obviously I was asleep, so I wake up and they're like, all right, you're going to be fine. You know, we'll look at it in a couple days. So a couple days goes by, and they're like, we have to go in for another surgery. So we go in for another surgery. I wake up, and they're telling me you're going to go home. Everything's fine. And then literally, like, this was the third one.
That was the third one.
After the third one, one day they're like, hey, you want to go home today? And I was like, yeah, I want to go home. Can I go home? They're like, you need to call your wife and tell her she has to be here before a certain time for pickup, because pickup was like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or something. Otherwise, I had to wait till the next day. So I call her, and she's leaving work. She's like, oh, I'll come right now. I'll get out of work. And then they come rushing back in like 10 minutes later, like, hey, hold on. Call your wife. Tell her right now you're not coming home. And I was so upset. I remember I gave her the phone. I was like, you call her. And I didn't know why yet. And she was like, Mrs. Rodriguez, you can't pick up your husband because he has to go back into emergency surgery right now. And I was like, what do you mean right now? Like, they're like, the infection spread to your bloodstream, and it's in my heart now, and it's going through my body. So as my heart was pumping the blood, the staph infection was going through my whole body. So they go in and they take the cadaver out. So now they take all the screws, everything they put in my knee. This is the fourth surgery. They take everything out of my knee, and they send me back to the hospital room. And then, you know, it's like I'm still in crazy pain, you know, like for days and days that I'm taking. They give me all kinds of pain medicine, and then they tell me I can go home. They're like, you can go home. You're looking better. It's like 3 days later, but I have to come back and do the surgery again at some point. Anyways, I get home, and they're like, they call me like an hour later, and they say, hey, we just got some bad results on your blood. The staph is still in your bloodstream. We are wrong. And they were like, but just go ahead and stay home and keep an eye on it, and we'll see what's going on. We'll be in contact. So now they're oh yeah, and I had a port in my arm. I had this thing sticking out of my arm that I had to shoot injections of antibiotics in my arm 3 times a day, and it was like a 20-minute process. It was horrible. So they call me, and they're like, we were wrong, and we'll just keep an eye on it. So a couple days later, like 2 days later, my skin starts to turn green. I was turning green, you know. So my wife takes me back to the hospital, at that point, they were like really worried about me. I haven't eaten any food. I haven't slept in days. And I was there for another 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks or something after that day. And it got to the point where there was a Friday night, they come in the room and they're like worried about my heart rate because they had me hooked up to all kinds of things. And now my heart's going crazy. It's beating super fast. And they're like, we need to go do an echocardiogram, which is they stick this camera down your throat to take pictures of your heart. And they told me that they would know when I come out if I have to get open heart surgery or not. And they were saying the same night, if I came out of this procedure, they only took 10 minutes, and it was bad, I was going to have to go into open heart surgery right away. So at that moment, I was like, these guys are going to kill me. And I honestly thought that. I was like, I'm going to die in here over a knee surgery, because every surgery kept getting worse and worse and worse. And like when you look in the mirror and your skin is green, and I haven't eaten food, I lost 20 pounds in the hospital. Like it was to the point where not that I didn't care, but I'd swear they would bring food to me and they'd leave it on the table, and I would just leave it there, and they'd come back for lunch, and I'd tell them take the tray, and they'd take the last one and put a new one down, and then they'd come at night. I didn't touch the food for days and days, and no one was even trying to make me eat more food. They were just like, all right, we'll bring them more. And so anyways, after the cardiogram, they said that it came back pretty good. They saw growth on my heart valves, but they weren't sure how bad it was, so they weren't going to make me do the heart surgery. But in my mind, all I heard was they saw growth on my heart valves. So I remember I was crying like a baby. I was like, I couldn't hear anything else. I went deaf. I couldn't hear any more. Doctors are everywhere around me, and they're talking to me about what the next steps are. And all I thought was, I'm going to go to surgery any minute now. So I think I even blacked out. I just woke up a couple hours later to my wife calling me, and she's like, no, you're not going into surgery. We're gonna wait, I guess. So anyways, that day goes, wow. And then I had 2 more weeks there, and eventually they're like, you can go home, and but I don't have an ACL, and that I wasn't going to be able to walk correctly until I redid the surgery. And this was September, and they were saying April or May. So I was like, man, I hope I could walk with my kids. That was the thought. I was like, am I going to be able to go to Disneyland with my kids and walk for 3 hours? And so the whole time I'm going to rehab, and the physical rehab was really good. But I felt like everybody was kind of counting me out. Even the physical therapist, I don't think they work with a lot of people who had an ACL removed. So they're like, hey, you can't run. They had me on the treadmill, walking with the handles, and this is months later. I'm still barely doing anything. And one day I was just I remember I was with my son at the park, and he took off running, and I had to go chase him and to catch him. And I ran, and I was like, oh, I think I could run okay. And after 2 weeks later, I just stopped going to physical therapy because I was feeling fine, but I was feeling that everybody's telling me I'm worse than I am. So it was hard for me to even think that I'm ever going to train again. At the time I was having opportunity. People wanted me to coach for them and do seminars and stuff, and I wasn't even texting back. They didn't even know what was wrong with me. I just wasn't answering texts, and it felt like this was it. I was like, this is it. If I don't have an ACL, everybody knows when you're doing jiu-jitsu, ACL injuries happen all the time, and when you have a bad knee, it's hard to do anything. So I thought that was it, and if I could ever just get to the mat and drill, I thought maybe I could just drill leg locks and never even walk, never stand up again. So I got back to the gym probably January-ish, 3 or 4 months after, and I was just barely moving, and little by little I started pushing myself a little more and more, and at some point, around February or March, I was just screwed, I'm just going to train. And I don't know why or how it's working, but my knee feels like it's almost back to normal or better, because I had my meniscus. I already had my medial meniscus removed, but now I had my lateral meniscus removed in that last surgery. So I don't know if they cleaned something up, but my knee without an ACL feels great, and I'm starting to feel like I can maybe get back to a really high level again, And I don't think I can blame the injuries at all. If I don't get to a high level, I think that it's just because of me maybe focusing on teaching or life. But weird, somehow my knee is kind of back to normal after all that, and no ACL, no meniscus. and I have a small MCL tear in there too. So I don't know how it all worked out, but it did somehow. Yeah, because one other thing I forgot to mention.
You looked
good
septic out there when
during this whole time. I went septic. I don't really, that term is hard for me to understand, but everybody keeps reminding me, like, you were septic, you could have died, you know. And now looking back, it's like, man, I feel fine. I feel better than ever, you know. It's just happened that way, but it worked out for the best.
Wow. What a crazy thing to go through, to not have any reconstruction.
During COVID, so I was doing all by myself. I was in the hospital alone. I was going to doctors by myself. You know, it was like a crazy year, which I've never even had anxiety in my life. I've never had anxiety. And last year, like when COVID starts, because my wife works in the hospital, she's got really bad asthma. We just had a baby, and she was pregnant. Like all that stuff together, it was like 2020 was just such a crazy bad year, to where I just thought that somehow, some way, I wasn't going to make it out of it, you know. And now looking back, it's like it's just opened up my eyes that like I don't need to be who I thought I needed to be back when I was younger. Like I thought I had to be this world champion grappler to get to where I want to be, but now I think, even now that I don't think I need to be that guy, I think I can still be that guy. I think I can still, like, I took second at the Masters Worlds my first year going with my knee torn up. I had 7 fights that day. I won 6 of them, and I lost the final by 1 advantage. And then 2019, I did the Worlds with my knee messed up again, and I won 4 matches and lost in the 5th round. So I think I can still get there, even after everything that's happened to me over the last couple of years. I just think it's just a matter of time. And like I said, I'm in a season of life right now where like the kids are more important, and my wife and my family and everything. And but before I know it, I'm sure like one of these days I'm going to be at some tournament. I'm going to be like, wow, I can't believe this is where I'm at, you know. Like I picture myself looking up at if you ever competed at the Worlds, when you look up at the pyramid roof and you see the way the roof looks, like I remember those feelings as a lower belt, and man, I kind of miss that, and I can see myself being there again at some point.
Nice. Well said, man. I mean, it's good to see you back.
Man.
I can't notice it when you're out when I watch you roll. I mean, I know you're not training like you used to be, or still, you know, you just selectively choosing
that's
your
what
roles,
I tell people,
which is smart, but
I think
that's
one
what you got to
thing
do.
that people should always look at, every injury, I feel like I get better after every injury, because when you come back from a long injury, like there's a lot of things you're thinking about. First off, like I don't have the cardio to go in there and go a 10-minute round with Aaron Wilson or Adrian Nez and go my hardest the whole time, and I can't be wasting opportunities. So like when I'm training now, I might take the easiest route. Like you used to see me do like crazy intricate guards where I have 7 or 8 steps to get to my position, and now like I'm playing guard, I might see a little ankle pick and just get up and score the 2 points. Like it's just I'm picking better moves. I think I always say jiu-jitsu is about high-level, fast decision-making. And I think my decision-making is so much clearer now because I'm not relying on my athletic ability as much, and I'm just picking what's there. I'm taking what they give me, you know. So that's helped me a ton.
Yeah.
Well said, man.
Awesome, man. It's been great, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I think we'll just end it on that note, knowing that you're back. 2021's been a lot better than 2020, and I mean, I'm just excited to see where you guys, both you and Vanessa, you guys are just going to keep progressing, both in jiu-jitsu and life, creating your family and working it all together, and someday having a gym, man.
I think it's all going to happen.
I'm excited.
I think this year, Vanessa's going to win the Worlds. I think if I sign up, I got a good chance to do it, and next year, I think the gym's going to open, you know, or maybe earlier. Who knows? I'm not in a rush, but I think good things are still coming, you know. So I'm excited, and I'm happy to be able to come on the show with you guys. Like, it's been a long time since I did a podcast, and I've had a few people ask me since my knee, and I just felt like I had nothing to share, you know. Like, who wants to hear about injuries, right? So I was like, I don't want to do any podcasts because I don't want to talk about my knee. At the time, I just didn't know who I was as a grappler anymore, because I was like, who am I now? Am I just like some injured guy? But now that I'm getting back to myself, like it's exciting to talk about, to move past it, You know, to think like that's in the past.
Yeah.
And I train with you guys, you know, and I haven't trained with you in a while, West, but I train with you, Paul, and it's like we didn't really miss a beat. You know, everything's how it was supposed to be anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. No matter what you think, man. I mean, it's first of all, we'd love to have you on again because your insight. I mean, we could talk jujitsu.
I know.
We haven't even touched.
That's my problem. I
We-
talk
yeah,
a little too much.
There's a lot of stuff that. No, that's great.
No,
man.
not at
It's
all.
been
Yeah,
great. You've had a
great.
lot of great information, but I'm just going to remind you as a friend, no matter what you think of yourself and who I am I just this injured grappler? No, we look at you as like an amazing instructor, dude. So I really want to thank you personally because I swear to God, man, you've been a huge part of my progression, and I use a lot of what you teach every day, dude, and I try to pass that on to other people, and I'm still going, man. I'm always anxious to get into your Friday morning class and learn some new leg game stuff. So I like where we're going with that, and I appreciate you, man.
And likewise.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, man. I've plucked a lot out of your game. We used to train quite a bit, and man, you've been a huge influence on me. And obviously I told that story earlier, but there's plenty more of those moments, you know,
and more to come.
Just really,
I
really
think that we're
influential.
going to have more good moments.
More to come,
you know,
man.
even
And
like
more
you
to come.
being where you are, West. We've already talked about how the future is, and with videos and the way we're talking right now, we're able to share information.
Yeah.
So I think all of us are just
Yeah.
going to keep learning, and man, it's never going to. If you've seen like Mikey Musumeci lately, like he's learning a whole new game right now, and to see how he's gone from that gi grappler, and now he's a totally different aspect, and he's still getting better at the level he was at. Like we can get better for sure, you know.
Yeah, crazy.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, brother. We will definitely have you on again. We're going to talk to you in the future about maybe something else.
Yes,
Maybe you'll
sir.
be opening a gym, but we'd love to have you on again. And thanks again. And we will see all of you guys
Suns and
next
seven.
week.
Suns and 7, guys. All right.
Suns
Thank
and
you, guys.
seven.
Have a good one. Peace.
Later.